Welcome back. In this video, I would like to add the following functionality. So once we go to US units, we see feet and inch here. And once we go to metric units, we see the height in centimeters. Now you could go as far as to also change the kilograms to pounds here. So change them hint that will be displayed for our first edit text. But basically I want to just add two more edit texts, which I'm going to make visible once I'm inside of the US units and make sure that this one is invisible. But then once I'm in the metric units, I make sure that those two are invisible and this one is visible. Okay, so I do that based on clicks on this radio button or any of the two radio buttons. So you will need to implement that yourself. I would recommend it at least. You just need to add an onclick listener. You can use view binding here once again to get access to this radio group and to the radio buttons, and then just make the right elements visible or invisible. And you can work on the property here for your weight. You could of course also add an entire linear layout around it, and you could say, okay, I'm making this linear layout for metric units invisible when I'm in the US units, and I'm making it visible when I'm in the metric units at the other way around. Okay, so there are many different ways to solve this, and I would recommend you try it yourself. You will potentially have a different solution that I have, but yeah, I would recommend to just pause the video and try it. Okay, so let's look at it. So what I'm going to do is I have these two text input layouts, right? So one that is just the, what is it? The height, I believe. The first one is the height, and the second one is the weight. Okay, so here, metric unit weight. And now, so let's go ahead and implement that. Therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a text input layout here, like so, which will be below metric unit weight. It will have an ID of text input layout metric unit height feet. It has a stroke around it, a hint text color, which are both green, has a style of outline box as we have used before. The width will be wrap content. I have a margin towards the top of 10. I say that the layout should be aligned to the start, so aligned towards the left. The visibility is set to gone, and in the tools it's visible. Then I have a layout margin of 10 density pixels and a height of wrap content. And then inside of it, and I have to make sure that this app compat edit text is inside of the text input layout. Inside of it, I have this edit text with edit text US metric unit height feet as the ID, width of match parent, height of wrap content, the hint is feet, and the input type is number decimal, so we can only enter decimals. So that's our first text input, and I'm going to add another one in here, which will also be pretty much the same. The only difference will be the ID and its position. So if we look at it now, we can see that it is dragged. One of them is dragged towards the left, the other towards the right. Okay. And you can of course download the code to get the same results here. Let's see. Well, actually we cannot even get to that yet. So first of all, let's go over to our code, and that would be the BMI activity. Here we will need to get access to our view binding object quite a bit. I'm also going to work with a companion object. That's probably something that you didn't set up yourself when you tried it. That's totally fine. So I'm going to have this companion object, which is going to have the constant value of metric units view, which we can then use. It will just contain the string, and then the constant value, which will be US units view. Okay, I want to know which one of the two is active, and based on that, make changes and adjustments. So let's first of all create a method that will make sure that our metric units view is visible. So private fun make metric, or make visible metric units view. You can call this method differently as you like. And then I'm going to need another variable, by the way. Let me set it up here because I need to know which of the views is currently visible. And therefore I'm going to create the variable that will help me with that. Okay, so this variable will be called current view visible view, which will be of type string. and I'm going to assign it as metrics units view as a default. So by default, it will be this variable to hold the value to make a selected view visible. Okay, and now in here, I can now use it. And as I said, there are multiple different ways to solve this. So if you solved it in a different way, congratulations, that's totally fine. So I'm going to say that the visible view will be the metrics units view when I make the metrics units view visible. And then I need to make sure that my text input layout for the weight, metric unit weight, and the metric unit height are both being active, okay, and being visible. So I make them both visible. And then I make the American versions invisible. Okay, so here the metrics unit weight, so here I'm making the US metric unit weight invisible or gone, and the US unit height for feet and inch, I make them gone as well. So about this metric units weight, you can leave it out. As I said, if you are fine just changing here, just changing the hint. Okay, that would have been an alternative. But in this case, what we will do is we will basically create another text input layout, which will take care of the US units for the weight. Okay. So let me create this in here. I believe I should put it on top of this metrics US unit height feet, like so. Okay, and here it's gonna say weight in PD pound, I don't know, in pounds, something like this. And now we should be able to use this till US metric units weight. Okay. Now what I'm going to also do is I'm going to clear the height value and the weight value if added. So that when we're changing to the other view, that we're making sure that there's no entry left. Okay. And then I'm also setting my linear layout display BMI result to be invisible. So even if we have results here at the bottom, once I click on any of the two, I want to make sure that the results are not displayed anymore. So here, if I enter something and I calculate, you see I get an insane BMI here. And once I click on this button, I want to make sure that this bottom part is made invisible. So this is our linear layout that we call display BMI results. Okay, so it's this entire container that holds all of those 4 text views, which you can see here. 4 text views are inside of it. That should happen when we want to make the metric units visible. Now we need to do the same thing with the US units. So I'm going to just call it make visible US units view. And you can see that I'm just saying that the units view should not be visible. I'm basically doing the opposite of what we did up here, where I'm making sure that my metric values are invisible. And maybe we should use gone here as well. And make the US units visible. So now we want to call these two methods depending on which of the options is activated. So depending on which of the buttons is activated. So I'm going to set up by default that my metric unit is going to be visible. So the metrics option. And then I'm going to add a binding.rg units. So here I'm accessing our radio group units and I'm activating a unchecked changed listener. So here I'm going to use this one where I get a radio group, which I'm not going to use. So I'm going to say it should be unused, and underscore is fine here in this case. And I'm going to call this integer that I get the checked ID. Okay, so now what I can do is I can check which of the options is currently active. So if checked ID is equal to r.id.rb metric units, then I'm going to make the metric units visible, and otherwise I'm going to make the US units visible. Okay, so if you manage to get this done, congratulations, because we have not seen this part yet. So here we are using a check change listener, not a on click listener. So here you could have tried it with binding.rgunits .set on click listener, but it would have been very tricky. So you would have to check the state manually and so forth. So you shouldn't use that for radio groups. For them, you should use this on check change listener, which will give you the ID of the item that is currently active, which is this second entry that you get from a checked on change listener. So we are using one of the overloads. So let's try this once again so that I can explain this a little better, I guess. So set on check change listener, you see you get a radio group optional, the one that is used for the checking basically, and then you get an integer which contains the ID of the item that was clicked. So this is going to be especially useful if you have multiple radio buttons. In our case, it's just two, right? We have the metric units and we have the other option. So we don't even have to have an else if statement here or anything. We can just use an if, and if it's not one, then it has to be the other. So if we're not making the metrics part visible, we're making the US part visible. Okay, so at this point, let's try this. And let's see if we can make one visible and invisible. Okay, so it does work, as you can see, but we have one little issue here. And that is that those items are not correctly positioned. Let me double check that. And therefore, in order to fix it, we need to use a little trick, okay? Because we are working with a relative layout here, okay? And in the relative layout, items are positioned relatively to each other. Now, you could, of course, go ahead and let's jump to the US height feet. So let me see. I think feet was the left one, yes. So here, there is this layout to start off. So here we would have to define to what it is to the left of, and then to what it is to the right of. And how we're going to solve this is by creating an additional view in here. Okay, so let me show you. I'm creating this view with the ID of view. It has a width of 0, but a height of 1 density pixels. And then it's below our metric unit weight. Actually, let's use it below our radio group. So here, RG units. And the layout center is horizontal set to true. Okay, now we can use this view where we can say that our metric units height feet is going to be to the start of our view. So ID view, and the other one is to the end of the view. So the US unit height inch, this ID here, is going to be to the end. That's why I have this align parent to at end, and here align parent at start set to true. Okay, so this unit height inch will also need to have this layout end of, or layout to end of, with the ID of view. When I do that, however, I also need to make sure that it's not going to be made in gone. So not this one, but this one, not gone, but invisible. Okay, so here invisible instead. Let me run it again. And now you see it works as I have intended. So you can see every layout has its advantages and disadvantages. So in this case, working with this relative layout, so that just to quickly go over it so that you fully understand it, hopefully. So we have this text input layout, which is our metric units weight, and we keep it in the UI. And I will show you in the next video what that means, like what invisible versus gone means. But generally speaking, we must have this view so that we can make sure that even though this view only has a height of 1 density pixel and 0 density pixel of width, it's basically not visible at all. We are adding our text input layouts next to it. So we're saying it's to the start of, so to the left side of this view. And we are aligning it to the parent start as well. So we're really making sure that it's to the left side. And then this other text input layout, we're making sure that it's to the right side. So here we're saying to the end of, and we are aligning the parent to the end to true as well. So this allows us to make sure that this view is going towards the left and this view is going towards the right. Now, seeing that, I believe it would have been easier to just create a container and make the container visible and invisible. I hope you did that, and then you have an even smoother solution that I have here. Either way is fine. As long as you're happy with the UI results, you should be good to go. Okay, so see you in the next video, where I'm going to quickly show you what invisible versus gone means in a little more depth.